pigtail on what you're saying, and one thing that's important to bring out between the light and the darkness is to say that the theologians and historians around the world believe that those magistrates, or the word magi, doesn't mean kings, it means magistrates from the area of possibly Persia, Babylon, where the Israelites had been hauled away in exile. So here's the good news of that. While they were in exile, Daniel and Ezekiel, who prophesied the coming restoration, also prophesied Jesus. They kept that belief alive for more than 70 years, and many people got to go back to Jerusalem, but many stayed. And so while they stayed in Jerusalem, those years and years of time, they still had this light that was revealed to them. So when the Magi came, the magistrates would have been group of important people of the court from the east, and they would have come with an entourage of military, and they came knowing that the Christ had been born. Now, how would they know that had not it been revealed to them by God many years before, and they kept the light. Even though they were captives in a foreign land, they kept the light. And they came to celebrate when the light came to them, which is, isn't that just really awesome that possibly Daniel and Ezekiel are connected to the Magi, the magistrates who came, and traditionally they say 3, but they only say 3 because there were 3 gifts, but it doesn't mean there were only 3. There would have been an entourage. And it's really interesting to me because when they arrived in Jerusalem, it doesn't say, and I was fascinated by this, it doesn't say that they went right to Herod. They went to Jerusalem, probably through the gate. The city gate was where all the main stuff was done, and they started asking, where is the child born to be the king of the Jews? Everyone's like, well, what are you talking about? Herod is the king, and he's not a Jew, so he wasn't born to be one. So I don't know what you're talking about. But it didn't say they went right to Herod. Maybe they did, but it doesn't say it in the Bible. So, but word got back to Herod that they were asking about the king born to be the king of the Jews. Now, Herod is related to, he's an Edomite. He's the son of Esau. Herod is the son of Esau. And Herod is actually related to Haman and the Amalekites. So remember when Samuel said to Saul, because the Amalekites had kept taking the innocent ones and coming against the Israelites, he said, you just got to go wipe them out. And Saul didn't do that. He didn't wipe them out. He didn't do what he was told. And so the Amalekites have always come against Israel, always been their enemy, always come again. And one of the people that got away from Saul because of his disobedience became the son of Haman, who we know from the story of Esther, tried to kill, again, all the Jews. So time and time again, Satan will use people to come against the plan that God has. And Herod, the time was this person again. So he definitely represents the darkness that you were talking about. And the interesting thing that I found about this, which really applies to what we're going through, is Herod was considered Herod the Great, and we'll talk about why, but in essence, he is the king of insecurity. And it is because of his insecurity that he has to destroy everything around him. And Herod had everything. He had palaces. In fact, Herod's considered Herod the Great because he was a great builder. And so he was the Roman person put in charge of this area. He was not a Jewish king. And the reason that he was put in charge, which I just found this out, is that Herod's father, Herod the Great, there are more than one Herods, but we're referred to specifically Herod the Great, his father knew Julius Caesar, which is amazing. So he had connections to Julius Caesar. And when Julius Caesar, if you remember on the Ides of March, was assassinated, Herod a very close friend of Mark Antony. And if you recall, after Julius Caesar was murdered, Mark Antony and Octavian took the kingdom, took the empire, and slew all the killers of Julius Caesar. So this Herod that we're talking about in the Bible was a close ally of Mark Antony. So he had incredible connections, incredible power, which is how, even though he's not a Jew, he ends up being the king of the Jews in Judea. And that's why, because he had connections. And it's really interesting, even though he threw his hat in the ring originally with Mark Antony. If you know much about the Roman struggle, you know that Octavian and Mark Antony ended up in a war because Mark Antony went down and had this affair with Cleopatra, and she convinced him to take the empire against Octavian. And so they came to heads, and Octavian won. And for whatever reason, Herod was not involved in that battle. He should have been on the side of Mark Antony. He ended up fighting some civil war somewhere. But he immediately, this guy Herod, was deceptive, a diplomatic man. He immediately went all the way to Rome to tell Octavian, as loyal as I have been to Mark Antony, I will now be loyal to you. He could have been executed. So it's pretty diplomatic guy to figure that out. So Octavian was very impressed by him and said, go back to the king of the Jews, I'm going to give you some more land. So this guy had everything, and yet he is one of the most insecure people in history. And so he is one of the darkest people. And he's considered, I was thinking, he's such a murderer, which I'll explain to you, but why is he considered Herod the Great, right? Why is he Herod the Great? Well, he actually did a lot of building, like he built Caesarea, the Maritime, the one right next to the sea, and he found out a way to build concrete underwater. So he did some pretty amazing buildings. He built Masada, if you guys have heard about Masada. And he always had a reason for what he did. When he built Caesarea, it's called Caesarea because he named it after Caesar. So he's like, I'm building this big city for you, Octavian. Here you go. I'm loyal to you. So he's always taking care of himself. And then the next thing he does is that he builds Masada, which is this fortress on the top of a mountain. Another really long story of the Jewish revolt about that. And it is so high to get up to, and it was his refuge because he was always worried the Jews are going to come and revolt, and I need a place to hide. I need a panic room. And so he built this amazing fortress called Masada. And later, when the Romans destroyed the Jewish people, there's some people that hid there, and it took the Romans months and months to take that Masada, and they had to build siege ramps for like a year. That's how amazing Masada was. And then he also he wanted to please the Jews, so even though he wasn't even allowed in the temple, he had the temple rebuilt and refurbished so that the people couldn't complain anymore that he was not a Jew. So he built the temple, and he built this palace called the Herodonium or something, and he took a mountain in Jerusalem, took the top out of it, and built another palace there. And then he did some beautiful stuff in Jericho where he built like a place for the rich and famous to hang out by the pools. He did all this amazing building. So people considered him the great. But deep down, he was just really afraid. He ended up giving Jericho to Cleopatra at some point because he was found guilty of a murder that he committed. So here's a guy that we're like, how he is supposed to be the murderer of all the Jewish infants in Bethlehem. So how could this powerful man be so insecure? He's so insecure. Herod is insecure because he doesn't know God. And all of his life is about preserving himself. And this is something for us to learn, because even when things are insecure, we have to just have the vision to see the light beyond where we're at. Because if we get caught in insecurity, insecurity ruins people. It ruins relationships. You know, every bad thing, a lot of the things you do and say against people and hurt people, you do out of insecurity or pride. And this was a very insecure man. And he was so insecure that he ended up killing members of his own family because he thought they threatened the throne, that they would take the throne. He killed his own wife, and she was actually, could have been sort of a salvation for him, because his wife, one of his wives was Marianne, and she was a Hasmonean princess, and she was actually a Jew with standing. So if he had kept her alive, their children would have actually had a chance of being in the throne. But he was so insecure that he thought she was unfaithful, and he killed her and two or three of his sons. And then he mourned after that. This guy is so dark and so trying to cover himself. And so when the Magi come and visit him, when they finally do, and it says in the word that we just read, that Herod called to them to secretly come and talk to him. And in the meantime, Herod did some homework. He had no idea who this Messiah was. He didn't know, so he called his priests and says, hey, what are these people talking about? What do we know? They open up all the prophecies they've ever seen. We know he's going to be born in Bethlehem. Micah said so. We know this and we know that. And so this is what we know. So Herod says, call secretly for the Magi, and I will tell them what I know. So he acted like he knew something, so he could get something out of them. So they came to him, and they said, he's like, here's what I know. He will be born in Bethlehem. And then he said, now tell me. Remember, he's a deceptive, diplomatic man. Now you tell me, when did you see that star? About what time do you think that the Messiah would have been born? And so they were like, oh yeah, well, we think he was born, within the last 2 years, and we're going to go find him. Thanks. We'll go to Bethlehem. And then he deceptively says, well, you know what? Go to Bethlehem and find him, and when you find him, come back and tell me, so that I can worship him too. And he's just covering his bases. He's just like, he's got to take care of anybody in the way, because he's living in insecure darkness, self-preservation. That's what he's living in. And so, of course, the Magi find the Christ child, because God sent them on the mission. They had the light, and the light went before them miraculously. Now, some people think there was some special star that happened, and maybe there's some evidence of that. But other theologians said, no, it was just this thing where God showed up and showed them the light so they could go to Jesus and give him the gifts. And so, which is amazing. In the meantime, Herod waits for them to return, and of course, they don't, because they were told by God not to go back. And so, so the thing that we have to remember, because we're living in uncertain times, right? It's really insecure. Sometimes I feel insecure about where our government is going. Like, what's happening? What's going on? And a lot of these people were in the same situation. For example, Herod decided that he would put the Roman eagle, outside of the doors of the church, the temple. And there was a teacher in the temple who taught some young students and said that was an abomination. And so some of the students went and carved off the eagle on the outside of the temple, and all of them were executed by Herod, burned to death, because he was so insecure. And so, so what do we learn from this terrible thing? We learn this. For one thing, Herod did. He sent his men to Bethlehem, and they killed every child, every boy under 2 years old, based on what the Magi had told him. And we think, what kind of a person would do that? A person who is insecure, a person who doesn't know God, a person who has to preserve themselves. And not long after that, Herod, and there's different ones, Herod Antipater and other, but this Herod the Great died of probably some internal disease. Some say gonorrhea, some say he has kidney disease, but he died a terrible and miserable death right after that, because God does not let the innocent go unpunished. He does not let that go. But what is sad is that he lived in darkness because of insecurity. Now, so what do? We live in a world that, I know some of us are feeling like if this election was rigged and we don't get the president that we voted for, it's like having an eagle posted on our temple wall, that it's like an abomination. Like, how can we live in this nation? We're not really free. And that's frightening. It is frightening. But and we have this pandemic, that nobody totally understands, and that's frightening. That's frightening. But in spite of the world's worst situation, God raised up the perfect time to bring Jesus Christ. And so we just don't know. We have to have the vision to be able to see beyond where we're at, to know that God has a plan, that God always has a plan to restore. He always has a plan of salvation. He's always working it out for anyone who wants forgiveness. And I was studying Ezekiel this week, and that's what we're going to talk about at Paskel's place this week. But Ezekiel points out that it doesn't matter if you were righteous, if you don't continue to be righteous. And he said, and it doesn't matter if you were evil, if you'll turn to me now. And isn't that very hopeful? It doesn't matter where you've been, what you've done, how dark you've been. It's all, we have the light of Jesus, and he will take anyone, all of us. There's nothing that separates you from God except your unwillingness to receive his free gift and light, right?
Yeah.
That's it. So we have the light, but our vision has to be more than just looking around right now. We have to know that even if the worst things come, God is still bringing the light. He's still bringing redemption. He's still bringing hope. So we have one job, which makes it easy, to trust God and obey him, and not to get caught in insecurity. One job. Doesn't mean be stupid. Don't run out on the streets and start kissing people you don't know. You know what I'm saying, right? Doesn't mean be stupid. But trust God and don't get caught in the insecurity. Just like know that our only job is to trust and obey, and he will do the rest. That's it. Our only job. Trust and obey. He will do the rest. And that's really all I have to say. I was really moved by how dark Herod was. And there's so much more I could say about him. Such a dark figure in history. But what we can learn from him is no matter how much you have, how powerful, it is never enough, because insecurity is a vacuum. And God is the answer. He has all the light. So, amen.
Amen.
Step out of your